question is, do you agree that Scotland should be an independent country?
For me, the principle that we work best when we work together.
Well, they didn't.
Very serious. The referendum. It seems to me that they're not dealing with the issues.
Hello, this is Scottish Independence Podcast episode number 53, and this time I spoke with William Duguid, who's been writing on his own blog and also at other places like National Collective. His writing's usually quite funny in tone, and we spoke about the comments that some people have made about the lack of humour in the Scottish independence debate. We also spoke about the differences in opinion about Scotland that he saw living down in England for so long, and we spoke about a lot more besides. So we'll just go straight to the conversation and have a wee word with you at the end. Hi William, how's it going?
It's going fine, thank you very much. It's a bit wet here in rural Perthshire, but we're more or less getting through it with wellies, so that's all good.
So I've noticed in your writing of late, there's a couple of things that have been rather amusing about the love bombing strategy that's starting to take full effect, I think. What have been your thoughts on this strategy?
Well, of course, it's got a lot of historical context, because I believe they did something like this in the Quebec referendum election back in 1995. Referendums are not elections, so you can fix that later. But there were all sorts of people from all across Canada saying how much they loved Quebec and wanted it to stay. And that's, to an extent, credited with the very close but negative referendum result that happened there. Somehow, I don't think I quite trust the ability of Better Together to come up with the right candidates for love bombing. And it's quite difficult to distinguish between love bombing and general bombing. I take it, for example, that William Hague's visit to lecture us on how we should have more clout in the world, I don't think that was particularly love bombing, although it might have been an attempt to tickle our sense of humour. But another one that certainly does tickle the humour was the John Barrowman thing. And I don't know how many people saw the YouTube video of him performing an Immortal Memory, clad in quite a magnificent tartan jacket that I had never seen the like of before, and that even the legendary Arthur Montfort might have found problematic. But more to the point was he seemed to think that a speech that was in itself fairly lame, and then kept having the odd dig at Alex Salmond and the Scottish Parliament along the lines of, he is a pudding and they are rubbish, aren't they? I don't think that quite was going to get the result that the Better Together people might have wanted. So I'm not quite sure about the quality of people they're going to be sending to us. We hear English celebrities, but we've also seen Russian celebrities such as Vladimir Putin. And of course, he's probably got some experience with the bombing part. I'm not so sure about the loving part. He's certainly a strapping figure of a man striding through the heather. But whether it's quite our thing, I don't know. Boris Johnson's come up lately. He was just there yesterday. And he gave us a spiel full of iron brew and haggis and heather and swimming with seals, somewhat bizarrely. Although I think he would probably do quite well in Auchterarder, where until lately I lived, where there are 7 hairdressers and they might be able to fix him. It could work over the long term. You never know. You just have to find the right people. But given Better Together's performance in doing the right thing so far, I wouldn't necessarily bank on it.
Yeah, I've been avoiding most of these love bombing things. What I did to get the same effect was a while ago, I just made myself a slow, continuous loop tape of train crashes, and I just watched that, and it is much the same effect. But you mentioned Canada there. One of the things they did towards the end of that referendum was they started to bus people in, ordinary people in, instead of a celebrity strategy. And they started to bus normal citizens, and planes were hired and everything, taken in the last moment into Quebec to try and sort of go and speak to people in the streets. We love you. Do you think we can expect something along those lines as well? And do you think it would work?
Well, it would probably be a good substitute for the normal Better Together campaigners, of whom there do not seem to be that many coming out even from within our own streets to talk to us. But who would you bus in? Would you bus in people from the north of England, where I suspect there might be a fair bit of sympathy for the Scottish point of view. And, if we get talking to them, we could well end up moving the border down to somewhere around Sheffield. Or would it be home counties people who just don't understand us at all? And I say that as someone who lived in the home counties for 30 to 35 years. The appreciation of what it's like to be up here and the things that play on our heartstrings, so to speak, that appreciation just isn't there. And if they go for the sort of people who've been commenting on the Daily Telegraph discus site, or indeed, heaven forfend, the Daily Mail, that is going to be very, very problematic. I did hear there was going to be some sort of maybe a phone-in going. So, if I'd advise all people in Scotland to sign up with the telephone preference service in case anybody phones you don't want to be listening to. It could help the tourist figures if they come, let's put it that way. That might be the best effect of all.
This is an interesting point because you talked about the lack of understanding from the people in the home counties and so on. And I think the examples of this love bombing that so far we've seen have shown that this lack of understanding is rife. There was an article by Robin McAlpine a while ago about, people in England, please check what's going on in Scotland before you start going on about it. And if you've lived down there for such a long time, although you don't now, why do you think there is that complete lack of understanding?
Well, there is no news coverage or general coverage on the TV or in the press that gives them any idea of what the political scene is like up here. The very fact that they still believe us to be subsidy junkies and England is basically paying for everything we do and probably we don't raise any tax up here, that's sort of knitted into the whole fabric. But, if you even listened on the day the white paper was released, if you listen to the level of questioning that was coming from the Nick Robinsons and the other Westminster-based reporters, this was stuff we'd been talking about years back and it had all been debunked. It sort of came from a basic ignorance. And if that's the ignorance that's possessed by the people that really should know what they're talking about, the general population has no chance whatsoever. Now, I had lots of friends in the home counties, and they're generally well disposed towards Scotland, presumably therefore they're not contributors to the discus site. And certainly we got on fine individually. But I didn't want to get deeply into talking about Scotland because there was a wee bit of a gulf there. And that's what you're seeing reflected now in the attitude of almost shock that's coming out that this referendum is happening and that it may actually go against the way they expect it to.
I've spent some time down there with one thing and another, and there seems to be a complete mystery as to why we would even consider leaving the union from general members of the public. But then when you were talking about the people who should know better, for them it's just a bit of sort of backwater local trouble. That's the attitude I tend to see. We can just put it to bed and then that'll be the end of it. And then back to worrying about London. Yeah,
the other thing is that they do see it in terms of separation and in terms of leaving, and that's because that's the way the debate has been painted. Now, I don't actually think that we're thinking in terms of breaking away. What we're looking for is the ability to take the decisions that affect Scotland for ourselves. It's as simple as that. To have a society that better reflects, or have a political way of doing things that better reflects the people we are. I don't think anybody outside of the London vortex would dispute the fact that the London view is the dominant view within the UK, and to a certain extent it's imposed on all the areas of the UK. And Scotland is just the one that happens to have been a nation and to have the capacity to be a nation of itself, with its own legal system, its own educational system, its own NHS, all the things that are already running independently. We just happen to be a natural fit for independence. It's not breaking away, it's just realising our potential.
The strange thing is that people talk about the Scots going back to sort of Braveheart and things like that, and it's usually only the Unionists that mentioned it, although I've just broken that rule. That's the Braveheart alarm, oh dear. But however, you say it's a a political system that better reflects the political culture, but I think we're looking for a political system that better reflects the century we're in. And in some senses, a lot of Westminster's just looking back at the history of the United Kingdom and everything. You know, there's still the House of Lords, ridiculous anachronisms. Maybe people in Scotland are looking for something that's a bit more modern. It's about modern governance, not historical anachronisms that continue to live on for some bizarre reason.
Well, I think that the only arguments that have been put forward for remaining in the Union that have any credibility whatsoever, and I don't think they ultimately have credibility, but let's grant them some, is this idea that, well, you're part of something big that's got a place in the world. We've got clout. We've got a seat at the top table. I mean, we're fooling ourselves if we say that. That's why the argument doesn't have any credibility. But I also agree with you that that's anachronistic now. The nations that are going to make a difference on the world stage are going to do it in this century, I think, by what you would call soft diplomacy or soft power. They're not going to want a seat at the top table. They're going to be talking to people. They're going to be providing venues for them to sort their problems out. This is one of the things that Norway has done, that Switzerland has done. I don't see any reason why we can't have parties who are having arguments with each other, Israelis and Palestinians, if you like. Let's have them over to Gleneagles and have a chat and just be the honest broker that maybe gets things going a little bit more smoothly. There's no reason to throw your weight around anymore. It's been proven that the 20th century is the most horrific century for that kind of approach. That demonstrated beyond doubt that it doesn't work. So yes, I agree with you. I think a smaller nation that maybe whispers rather than shouts and has everybody's interests at heart rather than narrow sectional interests, I think that is something for the 21st century, yeah.
Okay, just to move on just a little bit, because something that you're addressing with your writing is something that's been brought up by Rory Bremner in particular, which is that there's a lack of comedy in the independence debate. I'm not particularly convinced about this concept, but what about yourself?
Well, there is comedy if you look for it. Where you won't find it, I think, is in the mainstream. You won't find it on the TV, and you won't find it in the newspaper. So you won't actually find it where still the majority of people are looking. There may be reasons for that going back beyond the start of the independence debate. There isn't really in Scotland a great tradition, I believe, and you may correct me on this, of political satire or political humour. There is a lot of observational humour that's been done in sketch shows and in some of the sitcoms.
Well, really, let's be fair. Anas Sarwar's been a one-man satirical genius for years.
Well, I think he's an aspiring rap artist, and I'd like to see him in a rap with Loki to see who wins. It would be fascinating. Yeah, okay. That's satire from within the debate. That's kind of naturally generated satire, which is very good. I mean, the place where humour is, undoubtedly, is on the internet. And you've got some absolutely fantastic stuff. I mean, I spent sort of the first half of last year really reading up, because we were just moving up from down south, reading up on what was there and trying to educate myself about the scene. And coming across things like BBC Scotlandshire, the Ochai, the News, that is absolutely fantastic stuff. That's in the league of the Onion and miles ahead of the Daily Mash, which is the standard read down south of the offices. And then on National Collective, people like Greg Moody with his cartoons, and not just the cartoons, but he's also his own satirical fiction, which isn't, of course, related to the referendum debate. It's just the life and times of Tony Boakes. That's fantastic stuff. Derek Bateman, although he's now recalibrated his blogs a little bit so that his main blog now is more arguing for independence and against anti-independence, and specifically right now being particularly worried about the BBC. But his number 2 blog, as it now is, also has the odd satirical thing. And the other thing that's greatly underestimated, I think, from the satirical point of view is Wings Over Scotland. Now, primarily Wings Over Scotland, which was really my way into the independence debate, reading not just the articles there, but also the comments and getting an idea of just exactly what the Yes campaign and its supporters were up against. But Wings Over Scotland isn't just an excellent debunker of all the rubbish that's sent our way in the name of let's stay in the Union, but it also has a satirical edge, undoubtedly, that really, really works. The problem with all of the humour that's on the internet is I suspect it still remains a minority pursuit. People have to find it, but there's other difficulties with it too, because in a sense, Better Together itself is beyond parody. I mean, as you say, car crash after car crash, it becomes a bit one note if you're just slagging off Better Together all the time because they keep walking into the traps. That's the first limiting factor. The second limiting factor, I think, is that satire, particularly and political humour, depends on the audience being informed. Now, they are informed on the internet. It's because they're informed that they go onto the internet and they look. And it's not the audience's fault otherwise that they're not informed. It's just that they haven't heard what the truth is, or they're turned off by what they perceive as the sort of yaboo nature of the debate, which in itself is another challenge for comedy in the debate, because what level of venom, if you like, do you pitch it at? I take the view that you can't be too abrasive. You will put people off if you're too abrasive. I mean, people may read what I write and think, well, that's pretty abrasive, but it isn't really. There is a sort of gentleness in there. The most important thing, if comedy is going to get anywhere in the debate, and if people are going to read it, and I think it also, beyond the internet, needs to go out into the meetings and into maybe things that National Collective will be doing over the next little while. The challenge is just to make people laugh. Satire is about making people think, but first you've got to make people laugh. And if they don't think this time, maybe they'll come back and listen to you the next time, and they'll think that time. So you might just be planting seeds. But you certainly can't be too yaboo about it. If you are going against a particular personality or slagging off a particular personality, you've got to do it on the basis of what they say or they do. So you can say Anas Sarwar, yep, he's a rap artist, he's a motor mouth, never stops. That's a characteristic, you can use that. The other thing is, you don't want to be slagging off ordinary people who may be perfectly sincere in their views of yes or no or don't know. You want to be perhaps educating them, you want to be convincing them, but your point of attack has got to be the arguments themselves that people are being asked to swallow, the campaigns and how they marshal these arguments, or the personalities and how they poison or otherwise the debate. Those are the areas you've got to attack if you're really going to convince people. Otherwise, there's a strong danger that you'll put people off. And that's, to an extent, I think, what a lot of the recent furore about cybernats, and of course that's a whole can of worms of a subject, but a lot of that, I suspect, has an ulterior motive of trying to shut down the debate on the internet, which of course is where the humour is and where most of the educating and convincing might be going on.
Yeah, no, I think it is an attempt to shut down the debate on the internet. But just on the general point about comedy as well, there was an interesting thing from Frankie Boyle a while ago, where he said that, you know, the reason that he stopped appearing on these panel shows is because, you know, we should be using comedy to prick a bubble with the political scene. But instead, things like Have I Got News for You and the Now Show on Radio 4 have just resolved into a kind of infinite smugness, if you like. You think that's also something that should be avoided?
Well, certainly smugness has got to be avoided. The one thing, if you're doing political humour, the idea that you've got the truth and nobody else has and you're going to let them have it isn't great. I do agree with you about Have I Got News for You. I think it's disappointed me more often than not of late, and particularly on one or two celebrated occasions with regard to the independence debate. I think that is probably just a bit of a staleness of format. I've got a lot of time for the Now Show because there are solo spots where people write what they want to write and it's different in flavour. I suspect it's not very informed about what we want to be talking about, but I wouldn't say it's gone down the road of being smug yet. But it is certainly an underlying problem with what you would like to call the establishment comedy media.
So we should move on to another topic, because it's the question that I ask everyone on the show, and it'd be interesting your point of view in the fact that you lived down south in the extreme down south for a long time as well. But what was the thing that started to convince you that Scottish independence was the way to go? Is it something you've always felt, or is it a more recent development?
No, I was fairly agnostic about it really until relatively recently. I would probably have been a don't know with slight tendencies towards no, because I was swallowing the same calculation about who pays for whom and whether we're subsidised or not subsidised. I did have a number of Scottish contacts, but we never really talked about Scotland. I was down at Crown Court Church of Scotland for 30 years, for goodness sake. It was full of Scots. But we didn't talk about Scotland except in terms of when we were going back home for Christmas or for Easter. So I really would have started thinking about it by, of all things, reading the Scotland on Sunday, which I did have access to.
That vicious Cybernat newspaper.
Scotland on Sunday was not going to bring me to the Yes campaign, that's for sure. But I think I read one or two articles that certainly were not in favour of independence. And I noticed that those were somewhat at odds with other things I was seeing from contacts on Twitter. And it began to become apparent to me that there was a wee bit of a divide between what was going on in the newspapers and what was actually going on. But I didn't really think about it any more strongly than that until it became obvious that we were going to move back to Scotland, which my wife and I had been wanting to do for years and years and years, but somehow never got round to. And at that point, I would say I was probably firmly in the don't know camp. I didn't believe that the scare stories were anything like accurate, but at the same time, I hadn't done the math, so to speak, to see whether it would all stack up. So hats off. When I got back to Scotland and started doing my research into the whole thing, Wings Over Scotland was a huge, huge influence to me in just pointing out what the truth of some issues was, and also how much distortion was going on. And I think it's difficult to pin an exact moment on when I sort of moved over into Yes, but I think it was around about the time of the rally in Edinburgh, which was September last year, which I didn't go on, but I read about on Wings and I read the comment on Wings. And it just began to occur to me that there really was something here. And it kind of strengthened from there. I'm in no doubt now, having seen what I've seen, and having seen the fact that the arguments against independence just go round and round like they're on a baggage carousel. There is nothing there. There is seriously nothing in the no argument that's in any way convincing. And that's, if you like, a fairly negative way to want to vote yes. But the other aspect is, having seen the enthusiasm on Wings and in other places, and now having linked up as I have done with the National Collective, and just seen the amount of energy and positiveness that's part of the Yes campaign, if you can call it under one umbrella, the Yes campaign. Of course, the Yes campaign has many, many faces. I think that just reinforces me in the view that this is the way to go. To be a grown-up nation, why not? There simply is no argument for not doing so.
So you moved back a year ago, so you've missed, or a couple of years ago, so you've missed some of the rise of UKIP. But that'd be an interesting point, just to go on the negative campaigning a bit. If we stay in the Union, how do you think UKIP's going to implode, or from the area where you lived, or that's kind of their heartland, isn't it? So are they making serious gains?
Well, they're making, I would say, serious gains, or serious inroads anyway, in terms of the European elections. It always strikes me that this is completely nuts, that people would vote people into positions where they would just go and do nothing but pick up their expenses and yell at Herman Van Rompuy. So the European elections are coming up again, and I think UKIP may well feature quite strongly in that. But at the same time, there's now a wee bit of a backlash, even in England, against UKIP. And certainly with some of the stories that have come out of late, I mean, there's one councillor has blamed the recent flooding on God being angry that gay marriage was passed. There's been Nigel Farage turning up on the Daily Politics and basically disowning the UKIP 2010 manifesto and saying it was written by an idiot, despite the fact that he was one of 3 co-signatories to the foreword of it. And I think that's an area where you begin to lack a wee bit of credibility, even in England. So the big question really is just how much UKIP support will there genuinely be in the European elections this year? Because what will come out of that will be the most important thing about the UKIP. How do the Tories react? And what impact does that have on the Tory vote going into the general election? Because I still think there's a vestigial feel in Scotland that just maybe, if Labour get in 2015, it will be all right. And you can bet Labour's pushing that like mad. I mean, obviously they are. If the Tories are looking a wee bit weak, that could maybe strengthen the view of people that Labour will get into 2015, so we don't need to worry about independence. The truth, of course, is no matter who gets in, we need to go for independence. No matter who gets in, the Barnett formula is going to get a kicking. So watch out for the European elections, and we'll make a judgment on UKIP then. It's impossible to say beforehand. I have a feeling that maybe the UKIP tide has reached its peak.
To go back to the positive, what would you like to see in an independent Scotland? What changes would you like to see from the current style of Westminster that we suffer at the moment?
Well, I would like to see us do something that would be really a bit radical, and that's to deal with the question of unemployment. Within the whole developed world over the last 30 years, we seem to have got the idea that unemployment levels of 6% and above are acceptable and part of the norm. It's a very big project, but I do think that that's ludicrous. If you're going to have any sort of a proper welfare state that looks after people when they need it and to which people can contribute sufficiently to make it a viable prospect, you really, really, really need to do something to promote job growth and get unemployment levels back down into the really low percentages, swing the pendulum back in a way, because in itself that will break one of the other big issues, which is that wages are constantly being driven down. If unemployment is not a huge threat and therefore companies can't just sort of use it as a threat over workers' heads, then you will see wages increase. And I think that's the way to prosperity for everybody rather than just for the folks at the top. Now, at the moment, who knows what policies will be put in place. We're hearing about corporation tax cut, possibly, which Labour are howling about the possibility of. But I think if that cut is focused on the small businesses, the small enterprises that can really get people established and take on small numbers of workers and just make their way in the world and support them rather than strangling them with red tape, then I think that would be a huge, huge difference and would actually start to perk things up. The childcare thing, of course, is part of that, but that's, in a way, I'm sorry that the SNP have sort of brought that up because it's been used as a stick with which to beat them. And I think they could, obviously they needed to have a policy which was demonstrably something that could be done after independence that couldn't be done before. But I think more than anything else, it's led to a muddying of the waters. So I'll just go with the take unemployment down, which is one of these things. I want the world to be perfect, do it. But I think that should be a serious goal.
Okay, thanks very much. And just to come back to you, and then we'll finish off. So you said you're writing with National Collective, and there's also your blog. So what can we expect from your writing in the next few months as we run up to the referendum?
Well, up till now, the blog has been a bit of a mixture of the Scottish and the Westminster, and I will occasionally write about things down south. But what I'm planning to do right now, and maybe I'll have done it by the time this podcast comes out, is to split off the Scottish. It's almost like a recalibration of the blogs along the lines of what Derek Bateman did, and I'll have a blog that's exclusively on the referendum question and on Scotland generally, but it'll mostly be the referendum question for the first 8 months, and hopefully more frequent and slightly shorter and snappier pieces because I'm conscious that the length of piece I go into right now, it makes it quite difficult for me to react to events as they happen. And whereas I know BBC Scotlandshire are reacting to events perfectly well as they happen, I'd like to be able to do that as well. And of course, I have an interest in being as read by as many people as often as possible, because one day I would like somebody to be paying me money to do this sort of thing. So there's that. I'll also be doing a wee bit more poetry and verse writing. I call it verse writing rather than poetry, because when I hear somebody reading real poetry, I think, no, that's not what I do. What I do is verse. But a lot of what I've done up till now has been parodies of things and parodies of songs with existing tunes. I'd like to go into maybe a bit more original verse writing. And if there's anybody out there, by the way, who writes tunes and can't think of words for them and wouldn't mind lyrics that are sort of from the Randy Newman end of things rather than the Take That end of things, I'm willing to collaborate, because I sure as heck can't write music. If I do write it, I accidentally find I've plagiarized somebody. So there'll be a bit more of that. I won't tell you about the novel because that's probably a year or two down the line. But it's going to be a lot of fun. It really is. Lots of opportunities to do all sorts of things over the next 8 months and beyond.
It's one of the things about the independence referendum. Everywhere you look, there is something you can comment on.
Absolutely. Every day.
Yeah. Okay, so William, thanks very much. That's been great. Hopefully we'll get you on again somewhere down the line. I've really enjoyed that, and looking forward to reading your output in the next few months as well.
All right, thank you.
So there you go, that was William. I hope you enjoyed that. Just the usual please at the end, if you like, that you could help us out by telling people about these podcasts. You know, apart from Twitter and Facebook, where the presence is there, if you can try and tell someone you know about these, word of mouth is always the best recommendation, I think. So that would be useful. Normally at this point, I say the guest chooses the tune, and yeah, that's what's happening. But before we get there, we're going to have a little poem, or should I say a piece of verse, from William, which was originally, I believe, called an epistle to Alistair Darling. However, it was changed somewhere along the way to Ode to a Grouse. So we'll have that, and then that will just go into the tune that William chose. So speak to you next time.
We sleekit glowering, troublous darling. Oh, what a panic set thee snarling. Thy barefaced claims we can't use sterling dinna convince. The imprecations thou keep'st hurling are full immense. I ken wherefore thou art sae crabbit, thy physiog like a startled rabbit, thy point of view sae parched and scabbit, thine aspect grim. Faith, thou maun earn a handsome habit wi' ermine trim. I doubt na, but thy denigration of Scotia's self-determination is based on wild imagination or pochlan lies. Such mischief bears its indication in blinking eyes. Thy project fear has fallen to ruin. The cybernats gave it a doing. Now all deride its idle spewing of stories strange, and bold September's winds ensuing, the wind of change. Thou saw Carmichael bare and wast, and Muthi Sarwar speaking fast, and Michael Moore in ancient past for mercy plead, by Nicola's scything wit outclassed and left for deed. O grand Panjandram o' finance, who reads white papers at a glance, whose style of banking governance was fair found wanton, it's nae surprise we look askance at all thy ranting. Gauk, thou maun learn the lesson plain, thy negativity is vain, awa back hame and think again, thy schemes agley, and naught remains but grief and pain on voting day. How drab thy lot compared with me, Westminster only toucheth thee, and as I backward cast my ee, it turns to dust, while forward, though I canna see, I hope and trust.